Right, okay, so there are multiple elements to this that we've got to try and implement, but you should never try and do the whole thing in one go. You should break it down. So, as we were talking earlier, one thing that we've got to do is we've got to process each word in the words array. Okay? Bearing in mind that that just looks like a series of strings in an array. So that was my example one. There's another example one. Just to test it. Okay, but so our first step isn't to do the full solution. Our first step is to say, right, well, let's just get something going. So whenever we got an array and we want to process an array, we should be thinking iteration. We should always be thinking for loops, unless we are in a situation where we won't necessarily go all the way to the end. So if we were doing a search of an array, we'd probably use a while loop, because that'll let us break out of it before we get to the end. But in this case, we want to process all of them. So the for loop is the suitable one. So I'm just going to create a loop to control that. So I'm going to use K. Don't want massive names for control variables, because you don't want to keep typing them and making mistakes. So that is going to start at the first element, position 0, and it is going to run up until the length of the words array. So words.length in JavaScript. Oops, if I can type it, it'll. Words.length. And we want K to increment each time round. So I better put K, not L. And to test that I'm doing this properly, all I'm going to do is I'm going to do console log to print out the word. So I'm just going to say console.log, and it was called words, and we want element K. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, so I'm actually going to use this shorter one here. I'm going to comment that bit out. I'm going to use this one. There's 5 words, so I should get on the console window down here. If I can grab the divider, I should get 5. I should get Dave Bloke and Morris Gent. So I'm going to run that. Dave Bloke and Morris Gent. So that array processing is working. Right. Okay. So the next step, if I just say that, the next step is to say, right, okay, for each one of those words, I want all the characters. So again, I want to process every character of each word. So what I'm going to do, so I can get rid of that little bit of code now, I'm going to grab hold of a word. Now, I would in normal circumstances use the name word to refer to a single word. But we've got, and the example decided this naming, they decided to call the array of words, words. So I'm not going to use word because it's a bit too close and very easy for me to mess up my code. So I need another name to refer to the word. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call it next word. I want it to have word in there so it's got a bit of meaning, but I'm going to say it's the next one I'm going to try and put in. So I don't have to do this, but I'm doing this for a reason and I'll explain. So I'm going to say words K. So whichever item in the array we're looking at, I'm just actually making a reference to it really. Okay, so I don't have to keep putting words K, I can just write next word. So it simplifies my code. Again, I'm trying to reduce mistakes. Right, I want to process every character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a for loop again. So this time I'm going to use my favoured control variable, which is P. So that's going to start a note, and I want to process every character in next word. So I'm going to say, well, P is less than next word dot length. Okay. Make sure I do P++. Do my braces, so my opening and closing one. Right, so to check this bit works, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, output to the console. And I'm going to output each character. And the way that we reference a particular character position in a string is we put the name of the string and we can use array notation. So I'm going to say whatever character P is in next word, output it to the console. So the console is going to have a lot of things in there. It should just be individual letters. So let's try that. So I'm not answering the question yet. I'm just building the framework to answer the question. So loads of letters. I've now got to try and read that phrase. So I've got Dave, bloke, and Maurice, Jen. So that works. So I've got two loops, one to process the entire set of words and one to process each individual word as I get it. Right, okay, now the next thing then is to put it in this grid. So we said that in order to say where we're going to dump this, we need to create a row variable. So the row is going to start at 0. We want to start on that first row. And we'll need a column variable. So I'm going to call that row and col. And that's going to start at 0. So we're going to refer to that first box. That's where we're going to put the first letter. Okay, right. In order to test this without the complication of running off the end of the grid, let's make an even simpler test array. So I'm going to comment that out and I'm going to say update display. And I'm going to give it an array with one thing in it, just to get the logic of that working. So an array, and it's going to have chomp in it. Okay, so it's got one word. So it's a single array. Now let's put one more in there. Let's have chomp and champ. I know that's going to fit because we've got 20 character spaces, haven't we, in this grid. So I know I haven't got to worry about any control logic here. I'm just going to put in the letters into the grid. Okay, so I've commented out the other update display so they don't run because they're a bit longer. Right, so instead of printing out, what I want to do is I want to put each of the characters into the display array. So I'm going to say, right, put something in at the current row of display. I'm not doing any code for the row stuff yet. And at the current column, I'm going to say place in there. Remember, equals means store. So I'm just going to say next word. What did I use? P. So the current character. Right, what do I logically have to do if I want to make sure that I put it into the next location and the next column and the next column? Yeah, I've got to increment column, haven't I? So our basic logic is going to be col plus plus. Now, when you're doing these, we tend to just do it like that. But if you want to leave a space to make it clearer, please do. It's up to you. Right, okay, so this isn't going to do the full solution, but hopefully it's going to put some words across. So everyone happy with that? Let's try and run that. So the console, I'm not outputting anything to the console now, so I'm just going to save my sketch and run it. So it's gone chomp and champ. Now we need to make a gap, don't we? So where do we need to, how do we force that gap? We want a space after each word. So we need to like increment column again. But so when have we finished processing a word? In that code. So if I want an action to happen after I finish processing a word, where am I going to put it in that code? What line number does it need to be after? At what line have we finished processing a word? What line number?
30.
30 what?
Is it 30?
No, that's in the those two lines are the code that's acted while we're processing a word. Yeah, 32 is the end, isn't it? So after that line, that's when we've finished the loop that processes the word. So if we say col plus plus there, we're basically saying skip one. So let's just run it and see if that works. It might not be the correct solution. I'm going to try it. That did look like it worked. Okay. Now, JavaScript's quite interesting when you're messing about with arrays. Okay. So we look like we've got something working. Let's try it with the longer one here. This one that's got 5 words in it, which is definitely, well, no, it might not be more. Let's just say, I'm going to run it with that, see what it does. Right. So what JavaScript has done is it's just extended the array, because that's what JavaScript does. Okay. It's actually broken things later on, but that's a byproduct of the way that the arrays worked and the other code was set up. So we've run off the end. It's gone too big. Okay, so we said we needed to check. So before we start putting the word in, we need to see if it's the space, don't we? So I'm just going to put a comment here, check for space left. And we said if there isn't enough space for the word, we're going to drop to the next row. So we need to do an if. So I'm just going to put the logic in second. I'm going to put the actions first. So I'm doing an if. It's moaning because I haven't put a condition in there. But I'm just going to say, right, if there isn't enough space, so I'm going to put a test in there that's going to say if it's too big, we're going to drop the row down. So I'm going to say row plus plus, and we're going to reset the column. So we're going to set col back to naught. That's what I want to happen. So we now got to decide what the logic should be. So there were a couple of ways of doing this. So I'm suggesting that we just add column to the length of the word. So next word dot length. So that will tell us the total number of characters for that row. If that is bigger than, and in this case it was 20, so I'm just going to put 20 in. I could generalize it later. If the current column plus the length of the word is greater than the 20 character space we've got, then we're going to drop to the next line. So let's try that. So I'm going to just save that and then run it again. And it looks like it works. How can I generalize that to get rid of the 20? What should I put instead in case I make this grid bigger? Right, I could put, if I put display.length, display.length gives us, in a 2D array in JavaScript, display.length gives us the number of rows. In order to get the width, which is what we want, we have to do this. We have to say, oh, the first row of it. How long is the first row? That's the only thing you've got to remember in JavaScript. It's actually, in a lot of languages, this gets messy. Because you're saying, what is length? What do we mean? Do we mean the width? I mean, the reason we don't use width is because we sometimes work with more than 2 dimensions, and width wouldn't make sense if you had 7 dimensions. So it's like the length of what element of the array are we thinking of? So if we put display naught and run it, it still works. I can now mess about and I could change the size of my display if I wanted to. I'm not going to, but I could change it, make it narrower and get it to work. Right, so that worked with my little test one. Let's try that bigger one I've got. So that was the demo words, which was quite long. Okay, let's run it and see if it works. So, oh, that was a good one because 2 fitted right to the end, and then we drop down to the next line, and luckily it fits with the whole grid. Remember, they did say that they weren't going to give you anything that didn't fit. Okay, so let's just have a look at that and recap again. So, if I can just scroll that up a bit, yeah, just enough. Make the console window better. Right, so we have got, I'll stand up. Not that anyone on the video can see that because I've just seen this. Right, so set up something to control the position we're going to dump some text. Row and column. That should be obvious because we've got a 2D array. So we're going to need to be able to say what row and what column we're messing about with any 2D array. We then set up a for loop to process each element of the words array, the one that we're given. We then set up another for loop to process each of the characters in a specific word. And in order to make that look nicer, because you can see we've got, look how many times we've used next word, next word, next word, next word. If I'd have left it as words K, I'd have written this. I'd have gone words K, and I'll copy and paste that. And this will still work, and I could reduce the code by 1 line. But it starts actually getting harder to read. Okay, so I'm trying to keep things simple. Okay, That really should be, when I'm coding, I'm not trying to be, oh look at me, I'm the clever coder who can write a bit of code in 30 seconds if I speed up my YouTube capture video or whatever it is I'm doing. No, I want someone to be able to read it and see what's going on. So again, I've put a comment in here just to make it clear. Didn't need to. Someone could have looked at it and gone, oh, I think I can see what's happening. But I have put that comment saying check space left. So wherever I'm currently positioned to put something, how many more characters do we need space for? If that's more than the space we've got, drop down a row. As soon as we drop down, we can reset the column. That's all we're doing in there. And then this little fudge at the bottom, could have done this a different way. I could have like inserted a space at the end of each word, because I could have done that. I could have done words K plus a space and made it insert a space. That would have been another way of doing it. But what that highlights, and the reason I done it that way, is you've had to identify when we've finished processing that string. Okay? So if you need to do something after you've processed a string or an array, it is after that loop where you would put the next bit of code. So we just like to say skip along, and it doesn't matter if we were right at the edge, because this logic will catch it. The logic of the is there enough space will always catch it if we've gone off the end before we start trying to display it. Okay? Anyone got any questions about that? Right.